the BumbleKast. I'm your host, Ian Flynn, the BumbleKing, and joining as always is the lecturing doctor for the evening, Kyle J. Siabi Krause.
Oh, hello. Welcome to my classroom, where I'll be letting Ian take the floor and speaking mostly on our topic this evening.
Don't you hate it when the professors just invite some guest speaker so they can just twiddle their thumbs in the back of the room? What am I paying for this course?
I love it. It's great. As the professor, I am completely in favor of this.
So how are you, Professor Krause?
I am doing well, T.A. Ian. I'm doing all right. I'm finally catching up on some of my backlog of comics, as in I finally read Cosmo and Crusaders. I was gonna say Avengers, and I was like, that's not right. That's not right. That's not right. As awesome as it would be if Ian were writing Avengers. No. Not to say that the Crusaders are not awesome, because I really did enjoy the story. And it's a real dang shame that both of these are only lasting 4 issues.
No, Cosmo is going for 5.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the Wednesday after you listen to this BumbleKast, go to your comic book store the coming Wednesday and pick up Cosmo number 5, which is the end of the current run.
Okay.
I say current run because if there's enough demand, there might be another run. So let Archie know.
I hope there is more to this story and these characters, because I loved both of them, but especially Cosmo, I had a really good time with. I think
Cosmo was fun.
I think my favorite moment is in issue 4, where Astra, who I love, by the way, and Orby, who I also love. Orby's trying to jump out of a plane, but he's scared. He's scared. He's too scared to jump out. So Astra just kind of... It's just this perfect visualization in my head, too, of exactly what happened. It's like I can see the animation between the panels where she just, like, looks up, rolls her eyes, turns on autopilot, walks down into the holding bay, grabs Orby, and just throws him off with the same expression on her face the entire time.
Oh yeah.
It's glorious. It's hilarious. I had to sit there and close the book for about 2 minutes just laughing. So I'm like, Ian, you crazy genius. I know this is like the oldest joke in the book, and yet I am delightfully entertained.
As long as you're entertained.
That is it, man. I'm you know what? I will laugh at the same joke 1,000,000 times if it's funny. And it was funny.
Well, that's how we get along so well, because I only have 5. Oh, maybe that's 6.
Maybe you have 6. So, what's been going on with you, Ian?
Just trying to keep things in order on my end. A lot of stuff got announced recently. This Wednesday, I'm going to have a small backup story in Superman Special number 1 by DC Comics.
Ooh.
And as was recently pointed out to me, there is a mobile game called DC Unchained. It's a gacha-style brawler with the heroes and villains from across the DC universe, and I did the localization for the game. So the only weird thing is it's in English, because that's the only language I competently speak. And people are playing it, but apparently it's not out in North America. But people are finding the APK file. So there's like an official Facebook group already, but it's not, I don't know. Just go on your app store, and if you can't find it, it will be out eventually.
Sure. Yeah, Android's weird.
But it was just really weird seeing this one official trailer by the Korean developer, and it shows the artist's name first, and then it shows my name, like, here's this big important guy, here is his name, and flashing 3D rendered text, and I'm like, okay, if that's how you want to do it, sure, make me feel special.
Ian, you're writing a story for a number 1 Superman issue. I know it's not the main series, but come on. That's important. You're an important guy.
Yeah.
You're important. You're writing for DC Comics. That's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, I guess.
Come on.
I guess.
What else do we got in the Bumble news?
Well, you folks have demanded it, and we're finally breaking down and doing it. Going forward, each episode, as it's updated on YouTube, will have the questions for the Q&A listed in the description. So if you can't be bothered to jump ahead and listen to the Q&A, you can scroll down and see if your name shows up. And if not, I guess not listen to the episode. But you could learn things. There's so many things you could learn from the Q&A.
There's so many things you could learn from just listening to the show.
Well, there's that too, but I don't want to pressure anybody.
Yeah, I know.
But so far, all of Season 4 and all of Season 1 have been updated. So I figure if you're just starting out with the show and you're going to binge it, you'll probably start at Season 1. If you don't want to go through all that, you'll start at Season 4. So you can see in those videos who asked what. And the questions are a very scaled down version, so you get the basic idea. So if you're looking at an episode and saying, oh, did so-and-so ask about this, or has this question already been asked, you're not going through the long form of the questions like we do, because sometimes we get block paragraphs, and that really is not conducive to what this project is.
Sure.
I'll be going through seasons 2 and 3 as time allows, but given that those are much larger seasons at this point, it's going to take me a bit to get through that backlog. Also, as of this episode, if everything goes according to plan, Bumble Commentaries is going live for everybody and is starting to update again. We didn't quite get on that bandwagon like we planned to.
We do have 2 of them, though. We've done 2 so far. So
Yes, it's coming.
Yes. So we're coming along. It'll be up at BumbleKast.bandcamp.com. You'll be able to stream or download them for a simple 99-cent download.
Unless you were a patron, in which case you'll be able to find the free download link on patreon.com/BumbleKast.
Correct.
And we have reached the benchmark for the regular monthly patron chat sessions. We already owe you guys one, and unfortunately scheduling fell through on that. So we owe you guys that one, and at least one more. As soon as we can get our schedules figured out, we'll be announcing that and scheduling it, and we'll just hang out and have a grand old time.
Yep. We promise. We're working on it. But man, we've been just slammed with stuff lately.
It's been a rocky beginning to 2018, but, you know, beats being boring, I guess.
Sure. You can say that. I'm not gonna agree with or disagree with you.
Very judicious of you.
All right. Are we ready to get into our BumbleRaffle?
We are ready to get into the BumbleRaffle. The BumbleRaffle is a contest we have every episode where the listener wins a prize. What is that prize? You'll just have to win and find out. If you'd like to enter, write to us at BumbleKast@yahoo.com for every episode that you want to take a chance at. Otherwise, be a patron over at patreon.com/BumbleKast, and you will be automatically entered into every single drawing. Everybody has the same chances. It's just the patrons get auto-entered.
All right. Tell me who this week's winner is, Ian.
This week's winner is...
Zanoss. Zanoss. We'll say it together. Zanoss.
I think it's one of those names you have to say together. Zanoss.
I'll fix it in post.
And because it's got 2 S's, I'm assuming it's not Zanoss. Because Thanos has 1 S, so I'm guessing it's Zanoss, like Andros.
Yeah, that's kind of what it reminded me of. Maybe it's like a weird fusion of Thanos and Andros.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah, just a tad. Either way.
Imagine the Infinity Gauntlet on one of Andros' big old floaty hands.
Oh boy, that sounds like a nightmare waiting to happen.
Only I have the brains to use the Infinity Stones.
That might be true. Even though one of them is the intelligence, isn't it? Isn't mind? Yes, there we go. Mind Stone. So that's supposed to give you the intelligence to use it. I think. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how these things work, Ian. I just know that they're shiny gems. It's like Sonic and Chaos Emeralds. You know, you collect all of them and then you become super ultra powerful.
More or less, and there's gold involved.
That's very true.
Anyway, Zanoss, we will get in touch with you and ask you what you want to do for your prize. So keep checking your email.
All right. Go ahead. Take the floor, Ian. You're the TA for this week.
We're going to get a little headier in today's episode and talk about something that is influential in pretty much any form of media, but especially in writing, the concept of author intent versus public perception, aka the thing that drove me up the bloody wall in English class.
Yeah.
And to give the really watered down version of the argument, it's which should have more sway over the meaning and importance of a work, that which the author intended or that which the public perceives from it.
Mm-hmm.
So if I write X with the intention of saying something like, I believe this is my worldview, and the public perception from it is, oh, he meant Y. Who is right? Which way is the work supposed to be interpreted, and how should it be interpreted? Which carries more weight, X or Y, author intent or public perception? Professor Kyle, how would you weigh in on this argument?
Well, when I was in college, I took a course on film that I can't remember the exact name of off the top of my head, but it was like a film analysis class. And the teacher in that class said that author intent is null and void once it is publicly released. That only public perception should matter. And I disagreed with that. Mm-hmm. I believe that I think author intent is more important, but I think there is something to be said about public perception as well. I'm not 100%. I don't come down 100% on either side, but I think author intent should probably be the more important aspect of it, because public perception of things can change over time, while the author's intent usually doesn't. So I don't know. How do you come down on that, Ian? I have a feeling I know, but
I am constantly at war with it.
Uh-huh.
But I feel like, at least to me, that both should carry equal weight, and neither is truly better than the other.
Yeah, that's kind of what I felt was like. I kind of give more weight to author intent, but I think both can be important. So I mean, I don't really know how to vocalize exactly like which or how I would weigh them, but I don't know. It's just it's interesting.
I think because neither can exist without the other.
Right.
The author publishes their work because if it's in a vacuum, it really serves no purpose except for the author themselves. And in that case, the only audience is themselves.
Sure.
Can you really say a piece of writing or any form of media is truly published if it's not released for public consumption? Even if it's a small group, if it's not out there, all it is just your headcanon.
Sure.
I can write day and night in my head, but what does it matter? As long as it's locked away up here, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But once it's in the public perception, that gives shape to it from so many different directions. And I think that the author's intent is one of those factors. Like if I were to put out something anonymously, the public perception would consume the media, it would analyze it, it would form its opinion, and disseminate it from there. Then say I come out a year later, prove that I published it, and said, this is what I intended with it, that new information would be factored in with the public perception, thus changing the look of the work and the discussion of the work.
Right.
So without the author's intent, but you don't have anything to be publicly perceived, and you gain a new insight into why it's constructed. Whereas the public perception gives validity and purpose to the author's construct, but it may not necessarily be an accurate reading of it. Right. At the same time, if the author doesn't do a clear enough job, what they may be trying to say may not work. But on the other hand, the public may be very wrong. I have had instances where, I have written something and it's taken a certain way, and I have to sit back and go, yeah, all right, I hadn't considered that. That's an interesting point of view. That is a neat way to take it. Perhaps I'll explore it in that avenue instead of where I originally intended. There's also been things that I've written and put out there where the public perception is so off base, I can't connect the dots. I cannot see where the public is getting their perception off of the work. And part of that comes from the biases of those who are reading the work and bringing their own perceptions and applying it to my work, whether it's valid or not.
Sure.
But then the argument becomes, which is more valid? Their view, formed by their worldview, their experiences, their biases, or mine, which I may have a clear intent, but it does not necessarily mean that it will hold up under scrutiny.
Sure. And I understand that. I think there is something to be said about balancing both of them, especially in a publicly released work. But like the way my professor said that like author intent means nothing once it's released to the public was like, I don't think that's quite right. Now it could be a case of where the author is no longer alive, or like was not alive at a time when questions like this were being asked, or questions about the work weren't asked. So I think in maybe in a classic film context, it might make a little bit more sense because you don't really have anything to go off of. But by that same token, I think that there is a clear author intent for a lot of that stuff, and I think it still matters. So
I think finally I get to use my Shakespearean focus. There's a really striking example of this in The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. And we're going to do the very, very quick and dirty, less than Cliff Notes version of this. But the long and short of it is the most important and engaging conflict in the play is between Shylock, who is a moneylender, and Antonio, who is a rich entrepreneur trader, and how Shylock locks Antonio into a contract where if Antonio doesn't pay up, Shylock is allowed to carve out a pound of flesh from his body. Now, Shylock is one of the most famous Shakespearean characters from an otherwise kind of meh play because he is Jewish, and because he really falls dead center in this author intent versus public perception argument. Because this play, while set in Venice, was performed for primarily English audiences during a period in which the Jews were largely expelled from England by law, and the Jews in Italy were forced to wear clothing that denoted who they were. And part of the reason why you have this economic underpinning linked to them is because of the laws and religious practices of the time allowed them to barter and use money in ways that others could not, which was for good or for ill. Now, one way to view Shylock in this play is that he is the embodiment of anti-Semitism. He's conniving, he's vicious, he will refuse any amount of money solely so he can enact his revenge against Antonio, whether you believe he is entitled to it or not. And by the end of the play, Shylock is forced to convert to Christianity, which could be viewed, especially during that time period, as a happy ending for this villain. He has been redeemed, his soul is saved. The other side of the argument is that Shylock is almost inarguably the most sympathetic character in the play. He loses his daughter to another man of another religion, and at the same time loses half of his estate. He loses the last memento of his wife because of this. Antonio is, by his accusations, accused of inciting his enemies, getting in between him and his friends, mocking him at his losses, constantly getting in the way and driving down his business. So through Shylock, we get a pretty good idea that Antonio is kind of egging him on, but this comes at the expense of being given it through Shylock's point of view, and we can't necessarily say that he is a reliable narrator, at least in his speeches. One of his most famous speeches is where the term, "If you prick us, do we not bleed," comes from, which paints the whole idea of Jews are humans just as anyone else, and if you bring down your persecutions and your violence to us, we will seek revenge, just as you would seek revenge on us for anything we did to you. And again, this is very blanket statement, very broad strokes covering the argument and the character. But the argument and how it pertains to our topic now is, what was William Shakespeare trying to do with Shylock? Is he a product of his era, and that he really is meant to be an anti-Semitic character that you are supposed to hate, and that because of the richness of his character, you're somewhat relieved that he is saved by the end? Or is it, as we see it nowadays with a more enlightened and educated point of view, that he is someone who's been greatly put upon, not just by Antonio, but by the society and the history that his people and he personally has endured? Is his villainy a product of the society that has been foisted upon him? And is this Shakespeare's attempt at promoting some very, very modern sensibilities hundreds of years ago? The public perception is very, very, very. So what would make a excellent point in all this is if we had author intent. What was good old Will trying to do? Except we don't know. He didn't write it down, and some people don't even think he exists. So
yeah,
what do you do?
Exactly. Yeah, we have no real way of knowing the author's intent there, so there's no real way to exactly figure out what was going on in William's head when he wrote that. So.
And I think that's why you can't just say author intent goes out the window once it becomes publicly accessible, because it becomes a major linchpin
exactly
to the interpretation of the work. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we unearth some ancient notebook and we find Will was very much on the anti-Semitic, Shylock is the villain, I just wrote him really well because my buddy needed a good part.
That's possible. That's maybe
not only possible, but that definitely informs the discussion, because then it becomes a question of, how did he not see the forest for the trees? In all these arguments that Shylock makes, and in the interpretation of the character, that resonates so well today. I mean, it isn't even one of those instances where you kind of need the footnotes on the side to read his speeches and go, okay, what are they trying to say here because of Old English? It's really clear what's being said, and it's spooky how much it resonates today. If that was not his intention, how did he not see it? How did audiences not see it? And is that lack of logic part of what led to understandings of today? Or how does it describe how the audiences perceived their world at the time? It unlocks so many doors and so many questions, and it's flatly exhausting to think about.
And is there even really a way to necessarily find out the public perception at the time that was originally performed? Not really. It's
not really, no. I mean, but there's broad strokes in that we know what was, or what we've been able to ascertain about what was going on in society at the time, but we don't have a lot of on-the-ground, street-level experience, because not everybody was really keeping journals at the time.
No.
Or they haven't been preserved, at least.
Oh, yeah, or they weren't able to write, necessarily. Because, reading and writing is a fairly new thing, all things considered, in our society.
And there's the other side of the spectrum. What if that was entirely Will's intention? What if he wanted to kind of stealth in this very modern way of thinking? Would he be frustrated with the continued debate today? Would he not be saying, look, I spelled it out.
Right.
Prick us, bleed, come on. Plain English. Which way is it? It's one of the things that drove me nuts in early English analysis is because, if I write that the room has blue walls, does that mean I'm trying to convey the melancholy of the room? Am I trying to incite a sense of coolness or perhaps the sea? Or is it just the room is blue, okay? It's a blue room. That's all it needs to be, so it's not just a blank space. I say blue room, you're in a blue room. All right, you get it. Let's move on. But if somebody reads that blue room and they get that sense of somberness from it, and it's how they interpret the scene, am I wrong in saying that no, it's just blue?
Yeah, this even extends to nonfiction. Say, the Constitution of a Nation, written by people who are no longer alive. We have no way of asking them what they meant by anything.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just go back in time or bring anybody forward in time to be like, what did you mean by this? And would it still apply in this situation that we're having now? There's no way of knowing that. So the only thing we have is public perception, and that can throw a wrench into a lot of things. So, yeah, even just historical accounts of things that people will question it. The perception of the public will question historical accounts, and obviously it's a historical account. The person who wrote it is no longer alive to clarify anything, so we only have what we perceive to go off of. So I think that's really kind of interesting how much this applies not just to literature and fiction, but also to pretty much anything written, pretty much anything ever written, anything ever published.
So while I feel like it's probably a kind of ambivalent, hand-wringing, middle-of-the-road answer, I feel like you can't take both sides of the equation and distill it just down to one truth.
Yeah.
Because the public can be wrong, but it is their interpretation of it, and the author may have their intent, but it may not necessarily be clear, and it cannot be the only way of looking at the work.
Sure. And I do kind of like how there is a lot of how public perception can influence authors where they're like, oh, I never thought of that. And then if it's a continuing work, maybe they'll integrate some of that public perception into the work as time goes on. If they're writing a continuous story. Now, sometimes that could end poorly, or sometimes it could make for an even better work. So I think it just kind of depends on how the author manages that, and what they choose to use and how they use it. So I think that's pretty cool. I do like that part of this argument. So I think they can. It doesn't always have to be kind of versus thing. They can work together. So I like that.
I think it's also important to specify that we're not talking about popularity of the work.
Right.
Because whether it's lauded or criticized, that's not relevant to the discussion we're having. It's the way that the work is perceived.
Oh, you there?
Yep, I'm just trying to think of how to phrase this.
Oh, I have an example if you...
Oh, please, go for it.
If you want one. Are you familiar with the movie The Room, Ian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
The author's intent is pretty obvious based on accounts of what he has said, accounts from actors during the process of making the film, that he was planning on making it a serious drama. The public perception of the movie is that it is not. It is the exact opposite. It's more like a dark comedy. And obviously now the author has changed his mind and decided that he also wanted it to be a dark comedy.
Yeah, sure did.
So that's kind of the public perception influencing the author, but in a way that kind of throws his entire intent out the window. So, I mean, that's just one example I can think of where like public perception alters an author's intent, and that's also an example of something that most people would agree is not necessarily a quality work. A high quality work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or say the 50 Shades of Grey series, which I have not read. Not particularly my cup of tea, but it has been interesting seeing the public's perception of it. And those who take it as a engaging and a thrilling erotic adventure. And those who are more inclined to that lifestyle going, no, this is a dangerous piece of writing. It promotes ideas and relationships that are unhealthy on numerous levels, and it should be condemned for what it is getting the general populace to believe is acceptable. And right. I think that, too, is a very interesting argument there, because the author's intent was not to write fan fiction and then change the names around. But, public perception is, either one or the other. It's a very stark difference. So which is right in that regard? What is the weight of the work? What is the importance of the work? And it really depends on which camp you listen to. Right.
Yeah, that's a very stark contrast of public perception kind of battling each other. Where like half the public believes one thing, half the public believes another, and so you're kind of split.
Then there's a third over here who's like, didn't read it.
Yeah, right. Well, public perception, this is the public perception of those who have actually consumed the work. That's what So, and then you have also author intent, which obviously you've already said what the author's intent was. And hey, if you can be successful swapping names out of fan fiction, more power to you.
Yeah, don't tempt me, Frodo. Well, since we are so diametrically opposed on this,
are we? Were you thinking I would be like on one side and you'd be on the other and we'd have to duke it out?
No, not really.
Okay. I mean, you made great arguments on how public perception is just as important as author intent, so I think you may have swayed me a little bit on that front. I usually give a little bit more credence to author intent, and maybe that's just me being weird. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I really want to lean in your direction with author intent.
Well, I kind of
as the author,
I kind of thought because you are an author,
and it can be incredibly frustrating to put out a piece of work and it not be perceived, quote unquote, correctly.
Right.
But for me, that becomes a question of, okay, where did I go wrong? What if I thought I was putting this out there a certain way? Why is it not being perceived that way? And it becomes an analysis of myself, of the readers, and the climate at the time. What's going on in the world affects our perception of how we're going to interpret characters' events. Very, very fringe related. There was an old Sonic cover where he's drowning in oil, and the issue came out during the time of a really bad oil spill. And the public perception, at least at first, was that it was an environmental commentary at the time. Except the cover had been in production 6 months before the boat hit.
Right.
There was no way we had any idea that it was going to sync up like that. Haha, sync. But again, our intent was Sonic's drowning in oil. That's exciting. You want to read this issue now. And the public perception was, it's commentary on ecological disasters. No, that is patently wrong. There is no correlation, but it's still the public perception that we cannot control and have to take into account.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of looking back at older things from where the creators are no longer alive. It's kind of a similar thing where you're like, what did they intend here? Did this just happen to does this just happen to sync up with what we're thinking now, or what they were thinking back then, or is this completely different? We don't really know for sure. And then there's also, like, where things just magically happen to line up, like the example you gave, where it's like something happens in the world, and then you release a piece of media that's all of a sudden seems very likely that it was inspired by real life events, even though it most likely wasn't, just based on its production time.
And while I wanted to steer this topic mostly in general and not right back to Sonic, because we spend so much time on Sonic, you also have to take into account the reader's bias.
Yeah.
Because any single issue, there are folks who adamantly believe that you can read it as proof that I have a very strong Sally bias, or that exact same issue is very clear that I have an Amy bias. And that's not ribbing on these people, that's their perception of it. And it can be kind of fascinating to see the exact same issue, the exact same scene, same dialogue, being perceived so radically different because of reader bias.
Yeah.
And usually it's not meant to incite either side. I'm just trying to tell the stupid stories. Yeah. There you have.
Yeah.
Author intent versus
yeah. It's like
perception.
Yeah. There's like the argument that you don't like the freedom fighters. You never want them ever again. And it's like, I don't think that's true at all.
That's why I hate the freedom fighters. That's why the next universe arc was going to be devoted to the freedom fighters. That's.
I don't feel like you hate any of the characters in the comics specifically that you've written.
I don't.
I mean,
the running gag is I hate Marine because she was so weird, but that's the joke. That's
right.
That's the funny ha. You have to.
Yeah. I mean, and that's okay, I guess. But I mean, come on.
you have to take the public perception into account.
Right.
So I know that there are those groups that will read it a certain way. And do I write with that in mind, attempting to navigate around them? Or do I just write it in a way that I think will work, knowing that I'm not going to be without being able to appease either side? And if I take that kind of damn the torpedoes full speed ahead, is that going to really be to the benefit of the work? Is that going to work for the general audience? Or is trying to tune out certain groups going to make it less of a story?
Sure.
Now, do I need to listen to those sides and see what their points are and evolve from there? It's not an easy answer.
No, it's not. And you have people that get very passionate and very angry no matter what. So that's what makes it really difficult. So I completely understand. It can be frustrating, but it can also be enlightening too. Like, people point out things in ways that maybe you weren't expecting, and it's interesting.
That, and then it's extremely validating when I put out something and the majority seems to get it.
Oh, that too, yeah.
That they're in agreement with my vision and together enjoying this one idea together. As one, unified, as this great and terrible force moving out across. I mean,
Zanoss?
It feels good to be in simpatico with other people, especially on a creative endeavor.
Yeah. Nope, I can definitely understand that too. So, cool.
Well, now that we've asked the hard questions, let's answer some questions from other people.
Yes, let's answer the really hard questions. with our Q&A. It's Q&A time here on the BumbleKast. Remember, you can email us at bumblecast@yahoo.com, on Twitter @BumbleKast, or using the hashtag BumbleKast. I'm still checking that too. Down in the YouTube comments, or via Patreon through comments or messages there. Either way, we'll see it, and we'll eventually get to it. So be patient, people.
If you want your question answered sooner rather than later, head over to patreon.com/BumbleKast, become a $5 patron, and your questions will be bumped towards the heads of the line.
All right.
It's multiple heads. It's like a hydra. It's a Q&A hydra.
Cut off one head and the two more appear in its place.
Hail Bumble Hydra.
Maybe I won't. I can't say it. I had a joke I was gonna say, and then and then it would be horrible, and I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to make patrons mad by saying that you can cut off one patron and two more appear in its place.
No, not the implication. That is not the author intent. Not the author intent.
All right. Let's get to this first one from ScruffyMatt, which is very thematic to our to our current discussion. To celebrate the long-awaited release of Avengers: Infinity War, Sonic and friends go to see the movie at midnight release, cosplaying as their favorite MCU characters. Who do each of them go dressed as?
I can see Tails going as Stark. He likes the inventing angle. He likes the gadgetry.
Yeah.
I see Knuckles unironically wearing those foam rubber Hulk smashy fists.
Okay.
That's a guy he can get behind.
That's a good one. Would Rouge make a good Black Widow?
I suppose.
Could work.
I see Amy being frustrated because she also shows up as Black Widow, being somewhat of a tech and gymnast herself, then she doesn't really have a lot of options to choose from.
Right, yeah. I mean, you got, what? Scarlet Witch. I mean, unless you want to go outside of the movies and into TV. Into the TV universe.
Let's just stick to the movie.
Yeah.
Although now the idea of Cream as Scarlet Witch with a little Vision-style cheese is adorable.
That is very cute. Let's see. I'm trying to think.
Vector would definitely show up as Fury.
Who would?
Vector. He's the head of the spy gang, of course.
Oh, yeah. Who would be Hawkeye? I can't think of anybody.
Nobody really fits that kind of snarky... Well, maybe Sonic in that kind of snarky, quick-witted sort of way. But it's not really a question of what characters
right.
they identify with. See, the one I'm having the most trouble with would be Sonic.
Because
he is so
that's actually the hardest
self-actualized, I can't really see him cosplaying. He's cool with showing up with everybody, but I can't really see him dressing up.
He seems like, I don't know. He also seems like he'd be Tony Stark, though.
Maybe he's Stark and Tails just shows up as Iron Man.
Maybe, yeah. He just shows up, Tails just shows up in his suit. Or just a helmet.
And then everyone's more than a little unnerved. Big just trundles up with the Infinity Gauntlet.
Oh. See, and I was trying to think of someone who would show up as a character from the wrong universe. I was thinking, maybe it's Big. But I like that better. I like Big with the Infinity Gauntlet better.
One doesn't think of entertainment when balancing the fishing hole. But this does put a smile on my face.
Yes. That's perfect. Let's see. Who's green? We don't really have a green female. Blaze could be Scarlet Witch, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Identify with the whole fear of her own power sort of thing.
Maybe, yeah. And it's a similar fighting style, I guess. I don't know. Fire versus energy magic. It could work. Knuckles is the Hulk with Hulk hands.
See, I could see him being very divided. So I'd see him showing up with the Hulk hands, but also Mjolnir, because Thor's right up his alley.
Yeah.
Boisterous, conquering others.
Maybe he throws up with both Mjolnir and the Stormbreaker.
That's a terrifying thought.
Holding him with Hulk hands.
Oh, there we go. Maybe Sonic comes in as Star-Lord.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Sonic is Star-Lord. Yep.
A few degrees more mature than Star-Lord, but,
Is he really, though?
Current incarnation, yes.
Okay. I'm trying to think who Espio would be. I don't have a good ninja, really, except for maybe Hawkeye. He's not really ninja-y, though.
Not especially.
I'm trying to think of who else would fit for SBO. Man, this is hard.
Yeah, but I think we got enough to fill the seats. That gets you a good idea.
I think so.
If you think we're wrong, if your public perception is different, let us know in the comments below.
Yes, actually, go ahead and answer this question in the comments below. Regardless, I mean, I'd like to see what people think would be their idea of Sonic characters cosplaying as Avengers characters. All right, next question comes from Eric F. I noticed on one of writers of Sonic comic books mentioned getting the Archie comics put into a hardback book. I can't for the life of me figure out where it was said or by who, so I was wondering if you knew a good place to do this, and also what do you think of this idea, and would you sign it?
I know what he's talking about. I think we brought it up in BumbleKast Season 2? Question mark?
Yeah, this sounds kind of familiar. Like it was a long time ago.
I couldn't find the service again. I think it's an online service where you send in your books and they tear them apart and they take out the ads and they put them all together in one nice hardbound volume.
Okay, that's new to me. I wasn't.
Yeah, it's from what I remember, it was really classy looking. And for stuff that doesn't get a trade volume, or if you don't want to have very tiny trades, you want your whole collection, boom, right there in the book, so you're not storing everything in long boxes. It was a very nice alternative, very sturdy as well. And I couldn't find the link again. So if somebody can find that and let Eric and I both know, please, that'd be very cool. I think it's a super neat idea. Makes it look, like I said, very classy, very upper crust. And I would definitely sign it. Show up at a show or pay the shipping and handling to send it out my way, and sure, I will be happy to sign it.
That sounds like a cool idea. I don't necessarily want to have all my books ripped up to have them all stapled back together, though.
Well, that is a little disconcerting, but at the same time, instead of having all these floppies that can be destroyed by time anyway,
sure, yeah,
they're protected in a nice hardcover.
Yeah,
rather than sitting in a cardboard box as the basement slowly begins to fill with water and you don't even know.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. That's true. And if you're not necessarily wanting to hold on to them for resale value, you just like to have them, then I think that's a good alternative way to store them. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So mine are just in short boxes. I don't have enough room for long boxes. But I have a bunch of short boxes that I just keep everything in, so it works for me. I keep them bagged and boarded. They seem to hold up pretty well. So, all right, and our last priority question comes from Chris A. Hey, Ian, are fans starting to like IDW Sonic?
That is an understatement.
I was going to say, I just got the announcement today that it's sold out everywhere.
In case you hadn't heard the news, Sonic 1 through 4, all of them have gone into a second printing.
Uh-huh.
And Sonic 1 has gone into a third printing.
Yes.
Each individual issue has sold more than any of the old run by a large margin. And the numbers that are public right now are focusing mostly on the primary cover physical sales. Not really the incentive covers, not the digitals. So the numbers that we are seeing are the low end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and that's pretty normal.
And these are all full-priced individual issues within the course of a month. Yeah. It would make perfect sense for folks to get kind of burned out financially. But no. You guys... You guys kind of went crazy go nuts. So, as I've said on Twitter, I am humbled and so very thankful that you have made IDW Sonic just an unprecedented success.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I've only contributed to one of those sales numbers because I only have one primary cover. The rest of my issues are all alternative covers. So you're welcome, I guess. You're welcome, I guess. So now you have even more sales. You can add on 3 more. then
I'll be sure to let the bosses know.
Okay, good.
Hey guys,
let them know.
Kyle bought comics.
Well, you can just add it in your head. You don't have to. You don't have to tell them. You can just, whenever they say that, you can say +3 known other sales. And then, of course, you have all the digital sales, which I really wish they would release numbers of, because I think so many comics would have so many more sales if they would actually make the digital sales known. Yeah. But alas, I kind of understand that the brick and mortar stores are reticent to allowing that to happen. So, and the publisher, by which I mean the publisher, because there's only one. So, next question. We're getting to the standard Q&A now. This one comes from Neal H. Ian, I really enjoyed the Sonic the Fighters inspired storylines. Will loose adaptations of older spin-off games like Fighters, Sonic R, Sonic Shuffle, etc. be a possibility in the IDW book? Or have those things been determined to have already happened in the past in the IDW universe?
The games have happened. They are all past tense. I wouldn't rule it out entirely as like a flashback type of story, but given the current relationship we have with Sega and our plans for the immediate future, I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for that. Now, when new games come out, how we adapt those, how we fold those in storyline remains to be seen, but as we have stressed over and over again, this is a brand new book. We're only 4 issues in. We'll figure it out as we go.
I think you could, maybe older games, just take certain elements from them, not entire stories or entire plots, but, certain ideas and work them in. So I think that's a possibility. I don't know if you're even thinking about that, but...
Also, something else that has to be taken into account today is there's now a distinction between classic Sonic and modern Sonic as properties, which is not something we really had to deal with the Archie Sonic book.
Yeah, that's true. So,
it's a bold new world.
Things are going to get weird. Oh, wait, they already are. Our next question comes from Brodie M. If the Archie Sonic comics continued, would you have liked to do a story where Sonic gets turned into a baby?
I can safely say that never crossed my mind.
You don't want to do Sonic babies like Muppet babies, except Sonic babies?
No.
Okay.
No, and Sega would probably not let us do it anyway, so no.
Didn't that actually happen? Wasn't there a 48-page special that they did that in?
There were 2.
Like Sonic
that focused on Sonic, as kids.
Okay.
And Tails having incredible eyebrows.
Wow. I didn't know Snake had taken over ghosting duties. Hello, Snake. How's it going?
You could say that Solid Snake could hide behind those eyebrows. They were quite bushy. It was an interesting time for the comic.
Oh, man. I'd say the 90s is an interesting time for the comic.
The 90s were an interesting time, period.
For comics, especially, but yes. And finally, our last question comes from GoodfellaZombie. Ian, I just wanted to say that I was a huge fan of the direction you were going with the Megadrive comic. The humor and story was so on point, and I love the banter between characters. I lost it when I got to the panel of Knuckles retelling his encounter with Eggman. I was saddened to find that the final chapter of the series was in limbo, which comes to my question. What's the likelihood of the final piece of this series, or better yet, a new series starring classic Sonic in the same style from IDW?
Questionable. Given what I know of things, I would not be optimistic about Megadrive seeing its finale, which is heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I could be wrong. Things could move in ways that I don't think they would, and if they did happen, then cool. We just might get it. But I'm not holding my breath waiting for it to happen. Now, a classic series by itself, something new, that would be more possible, maybe? Question mark. Do not take this as a knowing smile, subtle hint. I There are no plans for a classic book. Straight up. There are none.
Yeah.
But at the time of this recording, if there was, it would probably follow more in vein with the Sonic Mania Adventure shorts that we've been getting online, which are just so bloody delightful.
Yes, I would agree. So, yes, public, do not perceive this as Ian announcing anything at all. But, we'd still like to see it.
Yeah, but just to keep in mind, Sonic Megadrive came out before Sonic Mania and was done before there was really a clear distinction between classic and modern as different properties.
Sure.
So Megadrive was written in a completely different climate than any classic work today would be written under.
Right. So I think we could see something that is differentiates itself from Megadrive, which would be cool too. I do still wish that the final part of Megadrive had happened, though. It's a freaking man. That's like the biggest loss of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, not hitting 300 is another big one, but man, losing Megadrive that hurts.
Yeah.
That hurts.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that the series gets to continue on and that, you're still doing it, Ian. That's good.
Oh, yeah.
That's very good. And that's the final question for this week.
As we wrap up the show, we're going to give a shout out to all the patrons who make this show possible. So a big thank you to Eric F., Daniel H., Alex P., Zanoss, Brando, Toller, ScruffyMatt, Chris A., John B., Sam Cybercat, Mike B., Samuel P., Jennifer R., David C., Reverend Light, Lisa M. A.E. Double, Brodie M., Neal H., Damo, Saturn Flicky, Justin S., Justin G., Connell T., David M. S., Adam T., Silly String, Takaro, Michael A.Q., Lee H.K., Chevelle, Don B., Sen Fritz, Taco El Gato Comics, John M., Eschivar X, James K., Tik Tik. We actually have a pronunciation guide for this one. Papadri Populos.
Very nice.
Overthinking Films, Adam BT, and Ron.
Good old Ron. Thank you, Ron. And everybody else who is a patron.
I will legit be sad if you ever stop being a patron and we can't say your name at the end.
Yeah, well, but don't take that as like you're obligated to stay. You're free to leave at any time, but it would just be kind of sad. But we like you, Ron. We like all of our patrons. Thank you, patrons.
We do. Kyle, where can they find you after the show?
I'll be right here sitting on my computer editing the show. But outside of that, you can also find me on Twitter at KyleJCRB. You can also find me at kngi.org, where you can find archived episodes of the BumbleKast, along with Nitro Game Injection, my video game music remix show that streams live every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And all the information is over there at kngi.org. You can also find the 24/7 video game music stream happening all the time, with repeats of the BumbleKast also happening every Monday at noon Eastern Time. Cool stuff there going on. Where can the people find you, Ian?
Head over to BumbleKing.com. There you'll find a release schedule for coming out, all the conventions I'm currently planning on going to, all the projects I can publicly talk about, and a whole big portfolio, script samples, the whole shebang. You can also find me at Twitter at IanFlynnBKC.
And don't forget, you can also follow the show and keep up with the news and announcements and when we're doing BumbleKast Gaming and all that good stuff at BumbleKast on Twitter. And you can also email us your Q&A questions and all that good stuff at BumbleKast@yahoo.com.
Speaking of BumbleKast Gaming, if you're a patron, you can catch us every Friday night for exclusive gaming streams. And you can go over to twitch.tv/BumbleKast Gaming for when we start streaming again.
And, of course, don't forget to check out the Bumble store at shop.spreadshirt.com/BumbleStore, where you can get you some Bumble gear, like a Bumble shirt, or a Bumble hat, or a Bumble eye patch. I don't think they sell those there.
No, but they do have phone cases.
You can get you a Bumble phone case for your popular phone. If you have a non-popular phone, you probably won't be able to find a case there. But hey.
Yeah, I don't think they have any for Blackberries, but I haven't checked in a while.
Well, Blackberry does still exist. They make Android phones now with physical keyboards. It's like the only thing they do now. So in case you wanted to know.
Actually, that's probably good information because I know some folks who would love a physical keyboard for their Android.
Yeah, and they supposedly they're really good phones. They're actually used for more secure operations like government use and stuff like that. So if you want a super secure phone, business-oriented phone, there you go. We're not sponsored by BlackBerry, by the way, although we should be.
Yeah, sadly.
We should be, dang it. With that kind of plug. Come on.
Kind of ringing endorsement, why not?
I don't know. I don't have a BlackBerry. The phone may suck, but I've heard good things. So
that's going to wrap us up for BumbleKast episode 68. We will see you in 2 weeks for BumbleKast episode 69. Have a good night, everybody.
69!
Yes, they're numbers, Kyle. They're numbers.
It's 69. It's the weed number.
No, it's not. That's 420.
420 is the sex number.
No, it's... Kyle, we need to corrupt you.
We'll just have to wait until we get to episode 420 before we can talk about that topic. Next week, we'll talk about plants. Next week's theme is plants.
If you want, I don't know much about plants.
We can talk about Plant Man from Mega Man 6. We can also talk about... Who else can we talk about? We could talk about Axel the Red from Mega Man X5. We can talk about...
Cosmo from Sonic X.
That's true. We can talk about... I'm trying to think here. What else? Mystic Cave Zone, where the plants try to kill you. Among other things. Are those plants? Would you consider those green things plants? Or are they like weird stalagmites?
Mossy rocks?
Yeah, it's weird.
I figure they always had too much weight to be just plants.
Mystic Cave Zone is weird. I also don't know why they're like ripping off the Inspector Gadget theme for it. It's a little awkward.
Hi there, and thanks for listening to the BumbleKast. If you liked our show, be sure to hit the subscribe button and consider supporting us on Patreon. We have some great rewards as well as big plans on how to make the show even better. Also, rate and review our show on iTunes. It gets more folks listening and helps us out, so we definitely appreciate it. Original music composed by Ken Coda Snyder, used with permission. Find more of his music at bc.s3m.us and find the theme song at noisechainradio.bandcamp.com, available as a pay-what-you-want download. Alright, so for our next Bandcamp album, do bad acapella covers of Sonic.
Bad out of sync covers, even, because we're doing this over the internet, where if we were actually in the same room, it would be a little more palatable, but since we're not, well, there we go.